Hello, my name is Craig Campbell from the New York City Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. Thank you to Amin earlier for the flattery. I'm going to talk about free lunch and how, through some clever math, my office brought in $10 million in revenue for the city, almost, but how your cities can probably use our results as well. So, fun fact, 1 in every 67 Americans under the age of 18 is a current public school student in the New York City public school system. And on September 7th of this year, the city announced that it would provide free lunches to all of them every single day. 3 months prior to this announcement, the Department of Education came to MODA asking for our help with a big math problem related to the way that they generate reimbursements and fund the program. So even with free lunch, we know that there's no such thing as free lunch. So who's paying for this? It's very common practice in U.S. school districts to have a free lunch program for low-income school children supported by the United States Department of Agriculture. And through a newer program that the USDA runs called the Community Eligibility Program, or Provision, or CEP, the USDA will support free lunch programs based on aggregated demographic information about schools as opposed to individual numbers of meals served. And so this prevents students from needing to tell their teachers that they're not able to afford lunch, which reduces overall stigma for students who are eligible for the program. So in this, the community eligibility provision, the schools pay upfront for meal reimbursement and then get paid back later from the feds. The USDA allows localities to group schools in any way for the sake of reimbursement. So for example, in New York City, where there are about 1,500 public schools, we could submit 1,500 different reimbursement requests. Or we could submit one reimbursement request that groups all the different 1,500 schools together. Or we could submit 4 requests or 40 requests that partition that 1,500 group in different ways. There are absolutely no restrictions, geographic or otherwise, on how you assemble these groups. But the way that you group them affects the way that the demographic ratios for the overall reimbursement shakes out, which affects the size of the overall check that's cut by the feds. And so that's where we came in. So our analytics question was, what's the optimal way to partition 1,500 individual units to maximize revenue? Our first instinct was to brute force it and try out every single combination. But because of the high number of schools, we were worried that we wouldn't finish in time for the start of the school year. That worry was well-founded. It turns out it wouldn't just take the whole summer. It would take longer than the history of the universe, several times over, even using the fastest supercomputers. So we turned to some clever statistics instead. We used a type of Monte Carlo sampling algorithm called simulated annealing. The basic concept was that we take our 1,500 individual schools and randomly sort them into different groups. And then we pluck one unit from one of those groups and randomly put it in another group. If that improves the overall outcome, we keep that step. If it doesn't, then we reject it and try again. And so we repeat this process ad infinitum until the results end up converging. So through this process, I think my slides are, okay. So through this process, we found that there were 4 optimal groups to place our 1,500 schools in. And given the DOE's reimbursement data from last year, our way of doing it would have brought in an additional $10 million in revenue for the program through no operational change, again, just through being smart about how we're doing the math. So while essentially this project is about exploiting a sort of careless oversight in the way that the USDA allows for reimbursement submissions, the way that we're thinking of it is that we're pulling out all of our analytical firepower of the city collectively in order to get enough funding for a great innovative program like this to run and also grow. So in actuality, we saved the DOE nothing because for the first time this year, the New York State changed the way it defines low-income students, and it resulted in a classification of our students that where the number of low-income students was so high that our analysis was moot. But there is a very good chance that your school districts also participate in the community eligibility provision in the USDA, and the Monte Carlo approach adds value even if you have as few as 15 schools in your district. And so you can find a fuller write-up of this project and all other MODA projects on our open source project library, bit.ly/MODALIB. Each write-up includes a plain language description, as well as the source code for all of the analysis that we did. So please take a look, and thank you for your time.